Behind every locked door lies a story the world was never meant to hear. Welcome to Behind Bars TV, where we uncover the hidden realities of the world's toughest prisons, untold inmate experiences, and the systems built to contain them. From supermax facilities to forgotten penitentiaries, we revealed the truth behind concrete walls and razor wire. This is not fiction. This is the world behind bars. Every prison is built on one assumption: that the guards are the line between order and chaos, that they are the ones enforcing the law. But what happens when the guards become the criminals? When keys are sold, when doors open at night, when drugs, phones, and weapons don't sneak in, they're carried in. This isn't a story about a few bad apples. This is a story about a system that quietly learned something terrifying. Guards can be bought, and once they are, no prison is secure, no inmate is contained, and no one is safe. This is Guards for Sale, the keys to everything. In prison, power doesn't come from size. It comes from access. Guards control who eats, who moves, who talks, who gets searched, who gets locked down. They control the doors. And once you control the doors, you control everything. Inmates know this, and the smartest ones don't fight guards. They study them. Who's broke? Who's angry? Who's tired? Who's drinking too much? Who complains about overtime? Corruption doesn't start with violence. It starts with conversation. The first favor. Every corrupt guard remembers the first favor. It's never big. A skip search, a longer shower, an extra food tray, something small enough to justify. It's harmless. Everyone does it. They don't pay me enough anyway. That's the moment the line moves. Because now the inmate knows something important. You can be bent. And once a guard bends, they rarely snap back. From favors to paydays. The second favor costs money. Not much. $50. $100. A prepaid card. Then comes the real contraband. Cell phones. Drugs. Weapons. One phone inside prison can be worth thousands. Not because it's rare, but because it gives inmates something the system took away: connection. With phones, inmates run gangs, order hits, intimidate witnesses, coordinate riots. And the guards? Some make more on the inside than they ever did on the payroll. But corruption doesn't stay quiet forever. Because once guards start selling access, someone always pushes too far. And when they do, people start dying. The guard everyone trusted. Every corrupt prison story has the same character. The guard no one suspects. He shows up on time, volunteers for overtime, cracks jokes in the break room. Inmates call him cool. Supervisors call him reliable. And that's exactly why he's dangerous. Because corruption doesn't wear a mask. It wears a uniform that blends in. This guard didn't start dirty. He started tired. 2 kids at home. Bills stacking up. Mandatory overtime every week. When an inmate noticed, that's when the conversation changed. Smuggling routes hiding in plain sight. Most people imagine contraband being thrown over fences. That's rare. The real routes are invisible. Lunch bags, boot soles, false bottom coffee mugs. Some guards used medical carts, trash runs, maintenance access. The most effective smuggling route? The guard themselves. No strip searches. No metal detectors. No suspicion. One officer admitted later, "I could bring anything in." Nobody ever checked. And once inmates knew that, orders came in. Daily. When gangs control the block, contraband changes the balance of power fast. Phones mean coordination. Drugs mean profit. Weapons mean fear. Gangs didn't need to overpower guards. They owned them. Cell blocks ran on schedules decided by inmates. Debts were enforced violently. Discipline came from gangs, not staff. Some guards pretended not to see it. Others couldn't. One rookie officer said, "You weren't in charge. You were just walking through someone else's territory." And the guards who tried to push back? They became targets. But corruption doesn't stop at money. Because once guards are compromised, they can be controlled. And that's when things turn truly criminal. Sex, coercion, and blackmail. Every prison rulebook is clear about one thing. Any sexual contact between guards and inmates is illegal. But in corrupt systems, rules become suggestions, and suggestions disappear fast. It often started quietly. Extra privileges, private conversations, long pauses at cell doors. Then came favors exchanged for intimacy. Sometimes it was framed as consensual. But consent doesn't exist when one person controls your food, safety, and freedom. In other cases, guards were manipulated. Recorded conversations, hidden phones, threats to expose families. One former officer admitted, once they had something on you, you belonged to them. Sex became currency, and currency became leverage. The phones that ran the prison. Cell phones didn't just break prison rules. They broke prison control. With phones, inmates could run drug operations, coordinate assaults, intimidate witnesses on the outside, order hits beyond the walls. Entire criminal enterprises were managed from inside cells. And guards made it possible. One phone could earn a guard thousands. Some guards smuggled in dozens. Administrators knew phones were inside, but couldn't explain how. Because admitting the truth meant admitting this. The threat wasn't inmates sneaking things in. It was guards bringing them. Drugs, overdoses, and cover UPS. Where phones go, drugs follow. Heroin, meth, synthetic opioids. They entered prisons wrapped in plastic, hidden in uniforms, passed during routine movements. Overdoses increased, some fatal. When inmates died, reports were vague. Medical emergency, unknown cause, found unresponsive. Guards suspected of smuggling weren't disciplined. They were transferred, or quietly told to resign. One officer later said, it was easier to bury paperwork than expose the truth. And for a while, it worked. But corruption always leaves a trail. And, eventually, someone followed it. Not from inside the prison, but from the outside. The guards who tried to speak up. Not every guard was for sale. Some saw what was happening and tried to stop it. They filed reports about missing keys, unauthorized movements, inmates with phones no one could explain. At first, supervisors nodded. Then the reports started disappearing. Guards who complained noticed changes. Worse shifts, lost overtime, sudden transfers to dangerous units. One officer said, you realized real quick. The problem wasn't the corruption. The problem was talking about it. Speaking up didn't stop the system. It just marked you. Retaliation from the inside. In corrupt prisons, information travels fast. Inmates knew which guards were cool and which ones weren't. Guards who refused favors suddenly faced problems. Inmates stopped complying. Fights broke out near them. Backup calls went unanswered. One officer recalled pressing his radio during an emergency and hearing nothing. No response. No footsteps. Just laughter echoing down the tier. Someone had decided he was on his own. That's how corruption enforces itself. Not with threats, but with silence. When the feds got involved, prisons are designed to handle problems internally. That's why what happened next was so dangerous. Someone went outside the chain of command. Tips reached federal authorities. Wiretap warrants were requested. Financial records were pulled. That's when patterns emerged. Guards with sudden cash. Phones traced back to prison cell towers. Drug networks tied directly to staff schedules. The investigation didn't start loud. It started quiet. Because once the Federal Bureau of Investigation steps in, they don't knock. They watch. And what they were seeing wasn't a few corrupt guards. It was an organized operation. The inmates thought they were running the prison. The guards thought they were untouchable. Neither realized they were already being recorded. Wiretaps behind bars. The most dangerous thing about contraband phones is that inmates forget they're still inside a cage. Calls were recorded. Texts were logged. Voicemails were saved. Inmates bragged. Guards negotiated prices. Schedules were discussed out loud. Who was working which tier? Who was bringing what inside? Who needed to be paid? One recorded call captured a guard saying, "I'll bring it in tomorrow. Same place. Same deal." That sentence ended careers. Because wiretaps don't lie. And once investigators mapped the network, they realized corruption wasn't random. It was organized. The arrest no one expected. The first arrest didn't happen inside the prison. It happened in the parking lot. End of shift. Uniform still on. Keys still clipped to his belt. The guard everyone trusted. The one supervisors defended. The one rookies looked up to. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. Because in that moment, he realized something too late. The system he sold himself to was never going to protect him. Search warrants followed. Lockers, cars, homes, cash hidden in vents, burner phones in drawers, ledgers written in code. And suddenly, the prison didn't feel safe anymore. For anyone. Courtroom confessions. In court, the story changed. Guards who once acted tough started talking. They blamed low pay, mandatory overtime, stress. Some blamed inmates. Others blamed supervisors. But the evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, bank transfers, recorded conversations. One guard broke down on the stand and said, "I didn't think it would go this far." That was the most honest sentence spoken. Because corruption never feels big at first. It grows. And by the time it feels dangerous, it's already too late. Sentences were handed down. Some guards went to the same prisons they once worked in. This time, without keys. But arrests didn't fix the damage. Because when corruption is exposed, someone always pays the price. And it's rarely the people who caused it. How deep the corruption went. Investigators thought they'd uncovered a ring. What they actually found was a culture. The corruption wasn't limited to one shift, or one unit, or one facility. It stretched across years. Guards rotated between housing blocks to avoid patterns, but patterns still formed. Some supervisors ignored warning signs. Others actively protected their people. Evidence suggested contraband routes that survived multiple staff changes. Inmates who knew which guards could be bought within days. Informal rules about what not to report. One investigator later said, "This was an infiltration. This was normalization." Corruption didn't spread like a virus. It spread like a habit. The prison after the bust. After the arrests, the prison locked down hard. Searches every day. Units sealed off. Phones ripped from walls and flushed down toilets. But control didn't snap back instantly. Inmates tested boundaries. They had lived in a system where rules were flexible. Now they weren't. Violence spiked. Not because inmates were angry, but because the rules changed overnight. Guards were jumpy. Inmates were uncertain. Trust was gone. One administrator admitted, "We didn't just lose control. We lost legitimacy." And once that's gone, rebuilding it is almost impossible. Inmates who paid the price. When corruption is exposed, inmates don't get rewarded. They get punished. Entire units were placed in lockdown. Privileges revoked. Movement restricted. Some inmates who never touched contraband lost visits, lost phone calls, lost access to programs. Others were labeled informants, whether they were or not. Violence followed. One inmate said, "The guards messed up, and we paid for it." And for inmates who had relied on corrupt systems to survive, life became more dangerous than ever. The guards went to court. The prison tightened security. But the question still hadn't been answered. Why does this keep happening? Why guards are easy to buy? Every corruption scandal ends with the same question. How did this happen? The easy answer is greed. The real answer is more uncomfortable. Most guards don't enter corrections to get rich. They enter for stability. But inside the system, stability erodes fast. Low pay, mandatory overtime, chronic understaffing, constant threat of violence. Guards work exhausted, undertrained, burned out. And when people are pushed to their limits, they start justifying things they never would have before. An inmate offering cash doesn't feel like a criminal mastermind. It feels like relief. One former officer said, "After a while, you stop feeling like law enforcement. You feel like labor." That's the moment corruption becomes possible. Because the system taught them one thing clearly: you are replaceable. When the system turns criminal, corruption doesn't begin with criminals. It begins when systems stop protecting the people inside them. When guards are underpaid and unsupported. When oversight is weak. When silence is safer than honesty. The system itself becomes criminal. Not because it orders crimes, but because it allows them. The guards who were arrested are easy to point at. They wear handcuffs now. But behind them stands a structure that made corruption predictable, inevitable. Because when prisons run on pressure instead of integrity, someone always sells relief, and someone always buys it. Prisons are built to keep criminals in. But when guards are for sale, crime doesn't stay locked up. It walks the tiers. It wears a uniform. And it holds the keys. The most dangerous criminal in a prison isn't always behind the door. Sometimes they're the one opening it. Long pause. And until the system changes, this story will keep repeating. Different prison, different guards, same outcome. The guards who became inmates. There's a moment no corrupt guard prepares for. The moment the uniform comes off. Some of the guards sentenced for corruption were sent to facilities they once worked near or with. They knew the routines, the sounds, the smells. But now they were on the other side of the door. Inmates recognized them instantly. Some laughed. Some stared. Some waited. Protective custody was offered, but not always granted. Because the system doesn't like reminders of its failures. One former guard-turned-inmate said later, "I realized how thin that line always was. The keys had changed hands. Retaliation without handcuffs. Not everyone who caused damage went to prison. Some supervisors resigned quietly. Others retired early. A few were promoted out of sight. But consequences don't always come from courts. They come from memory. Former guards reported harassment. Anonymous messages. Threats that never named names. Inmates had long memories. And they didn't forget who opened doors and who closed them when it mattered. Fear didn't disappear with the arrests. It just changed direction. The next prison. Administrators promised reform. New training. New policies. New oversight. And for a while, things improved. But corruption doesn't need the same people. It just needs the same conditions. Understaffing returned. Overtime piled up. Morale dropped. And inmates watched. Because prisons talk to each other. Inmates transfer. Staff rotate. Story spread. And somewhere in another facility, a conversation started. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a favor. Why the public never sees it. Most corruption stories die quietly. Because they're inconvenient. They challenge trust. They expose liability. They demand accountability. Prisons are closed systems by design. What happens inside stays inside, unless it explodes. And corruption rarely explodes. It seeps. By the time the public notices, the damage is already done. The uncomfortable truth. Here's the truth no system likes to admit. Corruption doesn't mean the system failed. It means the system worked exactly as designed. For the wrong priorities. Cost over care. Silence over safety. Control over accountability. When pressure builds and support disappears, someone always finds a way to cope. Some drink. Some quit. And some sell the keys. Who holds the keys? Every prison runs on trust. Trust that guards will protect, not exploit. Trust that systems will correct, not conceal. But trust without accountability is just hope. And hope doesn't stop crime. So the real question isn't whether guards can be bought. It's this. Who's making sure they never have to be? What you just saw is more than a story. It's a reality lived by thousands behind bars. If you believe in uncovering the truth, the kind hidden behind concrete walls and silence, then join us. Subscribe to Behind Bars TV and never miss a chapter in the world's most dangerous stories. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and stay locked in. Until next time, keep your mind open and your curiosity sharp. Remember, freedom and confinement are sometimes only a wall apart.